This was without a doubt the worst treatment I experienced during my time with Royal Caribbean. Why I work for 5 cruise lines? Part 7. As you learned in my last video, after being sent home to get my second COVID jab, I was given the option to either return to the Odyssey as 6 Feet Squad or join the Freedom as crew staff. I chose the Freedom, and it is a decision that I still regret to this day. Honestly, it was a nightmare from the moment I landed. I arrived at Miami Airport on July 1st, 2021. Normally, when you join a cruise ship, the company has a representative waiting at arrivals to meet crew, make sure you get on the right shuttle bus and safely to the hotel. This is normal practice for Royal Caribbean as well, but for whatever reason, they were the only cruise line not there that day to help assist their crew at arrivals. I was in America with a UK phone, so I couldn't use that. Remember, it's still COVID times, so the airport had minimal staff working and there was nobody I could ask for help. So after a 9-hour flight, I was dragging 3 heavy suitcases and a backpack all by myself outside in the Miami heat, just trying to find the correct shuttle bus. It was exhausting. Eventually, I did make it to the hotel on my own, but it was quite a stressful journey getting here because there was no representative from the company to meet me at the airport. Usually there is, and I couldn't get hold of anybody, so I had to kind of like flag down the shuttle bus myself. So yeah, I'm very, very tired. The reception staff had no idea what time I needed to be up to get the cruise shuttle bus in the morning. They said there was a Royal Caribbean representative working in that hotel, but he had gone home for the day and hadn't left any instructions for any crew arriving later that evening. By this point, I was so tired, I just went to my room and set an alarm because I knew from experience that we most likely will be leaving very early. So the next morning, I went down to try and find a representative and he still wasn't there. I actually have no idea when I'm supposed to go to the ship. I still have not seen a representative from my company. I've not received any information at my room. Reception didn't know when he was due in, so I asked them to give me a call as soon as he arrived so I didn't miss the ship. So I grabbed a coffee, went to my room and waited. Eventually, after an hour, I went back down to reception and the representative was finally there. And it was not a pleasant interaction. The first thing he did was shout at me because I had missed the transfer bus. I explained to him the whole situation and he didn't take any accountability and of course just blamed it all on me. He claimed he called my room, but I didn't receive a single call. So basically there was a little bit of a stressful situation at the hotel. I eventually found a representative at 9:45 a.m. who protested he tried calling me all morning, to which I told him I never received any calls. There was a lot of back and forth going. He said the coach has already left. Anyways, told me to wait for 30 minutes for like the next shuttle. I was all by myself. It was an hour and 10 minutes and still no one came. So I actually had to contact my friend on board the ship who had to tell the HR people on board. So they had to arrange a shuttle bus just for me to take me to the ship. At first, I thought it was just a frustrating start. Little did I know that was just the beginning of what was to come. When we arrived on board, we had to quarantine in a guest stateroom for 2 weeks before we started work. Now, I just want to make something really clear. This was my 4th time quarantining with Royal Caribbean. Back then, every time crew transferred to a new ship, we had to quarantine for 2 weeks, even if we were fully vaccinated. I had already quarantined on Adventure, Serenade, and Odyssey, so I knew exactly how the process normally worked. On those 3 ships, there were always basic essentials waiting for us in our room, like lots of bottles of water, snacks, a newsletter explaining everything we needed to know, who we needed to call for medical, trash collection, laundry, drinks, everything. The leaders on those ships really took care of us. Freedom, however, couldn't be more different. When we arrived, there was none of that. It honestly felt like they just shoved us in the cabin, shut the door behind us, and thought, get in there and don't make a sound. For example, there was no water in the cabin to drink. They hadn't provided a number for crew welfare, so I actually had to call guest services, which you weren't allowed to do, but there was no other way I could ask for help. So they eventually got the crew welfare manager to call me. I explained the situation, and about an hour later, a crew member came to my door with 1 bottle of water. Just 1. I was like, I know the company has lost money, but surely it's not this bad. I mean, I wasn't asking for a glass bottled Voss. Remember, we're in Miami, it's hot. I just wanted enough water to drink throughout the day. And that was the pattern for the entire quarantine on this ship. Every time you ask for something that should have already been thought about, I was made to feel like I was asking for too much. I soon realised this was the very first revenue cruise after COVID. Guests had returned and I understood there was enormous pressure on the operation. Guests should absolutely come first. I never expected special treatment. The crew welfare manager even admitted to me that with guests back on board that the crew welfare had slipped because all the attention was going on back to cruising. I understood that, but that doesn't mean the standard of care should disappear altogether. From the moment we arrived, it genuinely felt like we were an afterthought, maybe even an inconvenience that they had to deal with us at at all. Food was another issue. We had to order breakfast, lunch and dinner through an app, and because only 1 or 2 crew members were delivering meals to an entire floor, mine were often cold by the time they reached me, and the portions were incredibly small. In fact, I have pictures of 2 of these meals. I never imagined I'd be doing a series about this years later, otherwise I would have taken photos of every single meal. But hopefully these give you an idea of what we were being served. I mean, look at that poor little broccoli. One lonely little stem just trying to carry the whole nutritional value of that entire meal. Now, before anyone thinks this is just me complaining about the quality of the food, it really isn't. We all knew it was crew food. We all know what that's like. I wasn't expecting 5-star. I had lived off crew food for years. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that these tiny portions were what we were given day after day. We were completely dependent on the ship to feed us. And I genuinely felt we were not getting enough nutrition. And whenever I raised concerns about the meals being incomplete or the portions being so small, nothing ever changed. Instead, I was made to feel like I was the problem. And if you were still hungry, you couldn't order more, you just have to wait till the next meal. What arrived at your door was what you got. And then there was a situation that I now refer to as Diet Coke Gate. There was a separate app ordering system for drinks, but it barely worked because most of the time things you ordered would never show up. Luckily, I actually had a friend working on board who I was WhatsApp messaging, and she secretly left a pack of Diet Coke outside my door. Now, soon after, Royal eventually delivered me 4 cans of Diet Coke. However, 2 of them were empty. Even though they're closed, they're empty. There's nothing in them. It was just problem after problem with this quarantine, and I was so frustrated, I actually made a little Instagram video at the time joking about the situation. Ironically, that was the only time my direct manager actually called me. Not to see how I was coping, but to tell me to take the video down. It wasn't just about the food and drinks. There was a general lack of care and consideration throughout the whole quarantine. For example, maintenance staff would just randomly walk across our balconies to power hose them down without any warning. Now, under normal circumstances, that probably wouldn't be such a big deal to me. But after everything that had already happened, it just felt like another example of how little thought had gone into our privacy and well-being. I mean, could you imagine if that happened to a guest, just a random crew member walking across your stateroom balcony unannounced? It simply wouldn't happen. I mean, I could have been naked. But what made even less sense was we were in quarantine, yet random crew members were just casually strolling into our quarantine space unannounced. It completely contradicted the entire process. Again, I raised concerns and I was told that it wasn't really a big deal, was it? And to just close my curtains. It felt like every time I raised a genuine concern, rather than fix the problem, I just became the problem. Finally, 2 weeks had passed and release day had arrived. I know I'm making it sound like prison, but honestly, it wasn't far off. I had my bags packed and I was ready to get out of there, but then medical called. They told me there was an issue with my COVID test and now I wouldn't be leaving quarantine after all. The frustrating part was nobody could tell me why or for how long. Had I tested positive? Would I be staying for another day, a week, a month? Nobody would tell me anything, so I called my manager and asked if he knew any additional information. He said he would look into it and get straight back to me. And to make matters worse, I had run out of drinking water. I rang the crew welfare manager to ask for more, and it took hours for it to arrive. Something as simple as just asking for water just became a battle every single time. Nearly 10 hours had passed before my manager actually called me back. Straight away, he had an attitude of me and just bluntly told me that I would be released the following day. His tone was very much, "You're getting out tomorrow, so stop complaining." Now, when you work on board a cruise ship, you very quickly learn that there's often a culture of just get on with it, even if things don't seem fair. They operate under different laws, and if you are lower down in the hierarchy, there are times where you are treated in ways that probably wouldn't be tolerated on land. Sadly, over time, those things just become accepted as being part of ship life. You learn to pick your battles because honestly, it is just easier that way. I had done that for years, until now. By this point, I had reached my limit. So I simply asked him, why has it taken so long for you to get back to me? He was immediately defensive and told me he called me as soon as medical reopened. It was 10 o'clock at night. That just didn't make sense to me. He then said it wasn't his job to give me private confidential medical information. And I said, that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking why can nobody tell me what is going on? I had been left stuck in isolation all day with no answers and no idea how long I was going to be in there for. As my manager, I expected him to help me find out what was going on. But instead, the conversation turned into an argument. By that point, I was mentally exhausted. I told him I thought it was appalling the way that crew had been treated during quarantine on board this ship, and that I didn't think he did a good job as my manager. Yeah, He didn't take that very well. He replied to me by saying, "I'm your manager, how dare you speak to me like that?" And then he hung up on me. Honestly, I just can't tell you how upsetting it was. I had literally come from the Odyssey 2 weeks earlier where I had the most wonderful experience. I created the Pride video, was with an incredible team, had supportive leaders, and I felt like I was going somewhere. And then I stepped onto the Freedom and I feel like I have joined an entirely different company. Like my voice didn't matter. I had made such a huge mistake transferring there. The next morning, I finally walked out of quarantine. I thought the worst was over, but I couldn't have been more wrong because I was about to discover the true cost of standing up for yourself on board.